All right. Good morning, everybody. Good morning. Uh-oh. There we go. Let's try that again. Good morning, everybody. That should be much better. All right. This morning, we're going to be talking about the signal chat information. We're going to be talking about the Minnesota riot stuff. Guys, I ain't going to lie to you. I'm tired of talking about Minnesota, but the fact is, this is important. This is massively important. So the revelations, the new revelations coming out of Minnesota over the last couple of days, this is a big deal. And we're going to go through it, but let me summarize what we're seeing. We're seeing lots and lots of videos coming out of Minnesota now of activists talking about tracking license plates of individuals, of civilian citizens, talking about being harassed by just random activists coming up to them, acting like they're law enforcement themselves, right? Hey, telling people, you need to get out, you can't be here, we think you're ICE agents, you look like ICE agents, show me your ID. Whoa. Okay, and I've seen a lot of the talking heads on the right, Steven Crowder, Tim Pool, ostensibly on the right, so on and so forth, doing the whole, talking about the whole comply. The excuses, Renee Good, if she had just complied with officers, she wouldn't have found herself in that situation. When you're dealing with police officers, when they ask you for something, just, be polite. The place to fight is not right there on the street. Now, hold on a minute. Let's unpack that a little bit. Let's back up there a little bit. Renee Good did not get herself killed by refusing to comply with police. She took it further. She went from refusing to comply to actively trying to harm or kill, murder one of those officers. We went through that footage, we looked at it carefully, and we discussed it in detail. And there are two facts that I just think are way under considered by most commentators on that. One, the officer was off to one side when she backed up, changed her trajectory so that she was pointed directly at the officer. And then she hit the gas all the way, pedal to the metal. She straightened her tires, put the pedal to the metal, which we know, based on her having been, she's sitting on a snowy, icy road. And when she lurched forward, before she lurched forward, we can see and hear the tires spinning, trying to grab traction, right? That doesn't happen when you gently press the gas pedal. That happens when you cram it to the ground. And forget all that for a minute, right? Because the conversation about comply, this isn't the place for your fight it in the courtroom, there is a place for that conversation, right? Okay, I think right now that I'm being illegally harassed by police officers, or they're making a substantial mistake, right? I'm out in public, minding my own business, doing nothing wrong. Let's say I'm doing a First Amendment audit thing. I'm walking around in public with my phone, right? Filming in public. And let's just imagine, hypothetically, I'm not a First Amendment auditor. I don't waste my time on that stuff. I enjoy some of their content, but it's not my bag. But let's just say hypothetically, okay, I could be completely right with God, completely right with the law. I'm in public. I have a First Amendment right to record anything I can see in public. You can't trespass the eyes. All true, right? If you are in your private home and you choose to take all your clothes off and shake your titties in front of an open window that's visible from the public, you do not have an expectation of privacy. I can film anything I want that I can see in public under the law, right? So there's a hypothetical. You're doing just enough to get somebody's attention, but you're not doing anything actually illegal. The cops come up and they start talking to you. They ask you for your ID. We have the Fourth Amendment. We have the Fifth Amendment, right? So walking up, hey, how you doing today, sir? We just wanted to talk to you about what's going on. Oh, nothing's going on. I'm just filming in public. Okay, cool. Can we see your ID? Right there. right there. You're in a voluntary encounter. You're having a voluntary conversation, and they have asked you for your ID. Now, at this point, the police officer has done nothing wrong, nothing illegal. He has not violated your rights. He has asked, he has made a request, and his First Amendment absolutely protects him in making that request. Cool. However, the request he has made is one that you are not required to comply with. Not every state has stop and ID laws. Some do. But in states that have a stop and ID law, they still have a constitutional requirement of probable cause or articulable reasonable suspicion to initiate the stop and ID requirement. They cannot just randomly ask people for their papers. Cool. Now, when you're talking about ICE dealing with hostile foreign immigrants, there is probable cause and there is a reasonable articulable suspicion that opens up the conversation, I need to see your green card. Okay? So up until now, we're talking about voluntary conversation. The police officer makes a reasonable request that is perfectly lawful, perfectly reasonable, and you still have the right to refuse the request. And I recommend, although it's not required by law, that you do it politely. Right? The answer to the question, can I see your ID, when you're not yet required to do it, is not, go fuck yourself, pig. It's, no, I'm good. You don't need that. We're okay here. Now, he insists. Now it's reasonable to ask the question, am I being detained? And if the answer is yes, you shut up. If he says no, and you ask, may I leave? Then you are detained under the law, because the definition under the law of whether or not you have been detained is if a reasonable person would feel that there would be negative consequences associated with choosing to leave the scene at that point. We talked about this yesterday when we were discussing the fact under the law that the terrorists that raided the Minnesota church actually committed the crime of kidnapping, because they created a situation where those people, a reasonable person in that situation, would feel that if they were to attempt to leave, they would suffer negative consequences, likely physical harm. Okay. Now we're at the level of detention. Now, at that point, you're still not required. The law still requires more to compel you to produce your documents. Once you are actually compelled to produce your documents, now you are under arrest, whether the officer says so or not. There are legal standards in place whereby a police officer cannot craft a de facto arrest without stating the arrest, so that he can try and circumvent your Fourth and Fifth Amendment rights by putting you in a position where you thought you were under arrest, but you really weren't. If you have the reasonable belief that you have been arrested, then legally you have in fact been arrested. At that point, you have to produce your papers. You're in the system. And at every step in this process, this is important here, at every step in this process, assuming, as I stated at the beginning of laying this out, assuming you have done nothing wrong, compliance, courtesy, all good. Right? Maybe you spend a little time in the lockup, you get in front of a judge, you get rid of, you have the officer's immunity, his, damn it, what's it called? The immunity. One of you in the chat will remind me, I just lost a word. You have the officer's qualified immunity removed based on the legal analysis, where a judge would conclude no reasonable officer could have not understood that he was in the wrong here. Right? Qualified immunity, in theory, is for novel situations where an officer has inadvertently violated your rights, inadvertently broken the procedure, because it's a novel situation where he had to make a determination as an official agent of the government, and he got it wrong, but nobody's ever gotten this one wrong before, so we've never thought about it before. So we're going to say, okay, look, yes, he was wrong, but he wasn't trying to be wrong, right? And that, that gives him a little cover in, and let's be real, there is such a thing as a bad shoot, an imperfect self-defense, if you will, right? Where everything on the scene was misinterpreted, but not maliciously so, and the final outcome is a bad one, right? But in theory, right, we have a system that assumes innocence. We have a system that assumes innocence until guilt is proven. In theory, that's what qualified immunity is for. Now, we could table the whole conversation about whether or not we should revoke qualified immunity broad scale, and I tend to lean that direction, but not entirely, because qualified immunity gets abused. Qualified immunity is a good thing, except that it gets abused very often. It's like so many other things. It's like many of the rights that are protected by the Constitution. It is a good thing that I support entirely, except that the enemy uses it to abuse you. That's a whole other conversation. That's off the table. So what I've just laid out for you, that's the normal course of an interaction with a police officer for a common law-abiding citizen. What needs to be understood in the cases of people like Renee Good and what's this other guy's name? Pretty? In the case of people like Good and Pretty, is that these were not that kind of interaction. That is a very, very important factor that needs to be considered here. Renee Good and Nurse Pretty, right? The lesbian and the transvestite. Okay. They both have a history of engagement in unlawful activism. And I do not say that flippantly. What Good had is a history, a track record of going and intentionally blocking traffic, leading protesters to block traffic for the expressed, not just explicit, but explicitly expressed purpose of interfering with governmental operations, with legitimate governmental operations. Forget for a moment about whether or not you agree with the activity that the government is doing. Right now, we're talking about the question of engagement with law enforcement. If the law enforcement is wrong and you are choosing to engage with them on that, you are taking your life into your own hands. Same thing with Pretty. Pretty has a history all the way back to the Summer of Love of engaging with these terrorists and being involved in the violent riots, burning down buildings, murdering people. Okay. Rioters have burned down buildings and murdered people. I am not saying that Pretty himself previously murdered people as part of his involvement with these riots, but he was absolutely involved with being on scene and agitating and activating against the government, most especially while Trump has been in office, both terms. It is not the case. It's not like this was just some random civilian who happened to have a firearm that got tackled by the cops and got himself shot. That's not what happened. A habitual, professional activist chose to commit crimes and engage violently with police officers while armed and got himself shot for his trouble. Y'all, I have had more than a few encounters with police officers while I was armed. You'll note, I've never been shot by a cop. I've never even been shot at by a cop. Not an American cop. I've never been shot at by an American cop. Yeah, I've never been shot at by an American cop. Okay. Because, for one, I don't have a duty to disclose. In the state of Georgia, it is a violation of your Georgia state constitutional rights under the law from, I think it was 2017 or 18. The same law that gave us campus carry, not constitutional carry, but campus carry, explicitly detailed how the police are allowed to interact with you. They're not allowed to ask you if you're armed. They're not allowed to ask you if you're licensed to be armed. They can ask you if it rises to the occasion, through the voluntary interaction, detention, arrest scale. There's a point where they can ask you if you're armed. Like when you're under arrest, then they can ask you the question if you're armed before they pat you down and search you for weapons. That gets a little deeper into the weeds. We don't need to go that far. But just on an interaction, a cop can't walk up to a random citizen in the state of Georgia and say, "Hey, you got a gun? You got a license for that, mate?" That's not an option here, right? So I've had a few interactions with police. I told you guys the rather long story. Several years ago, I was shooting a house in Conyers, Georgia, I'm talking about guns. Let me clarify. I was shooting photography for a client at a house, and the neighbor across the street took issue with my car being parked in front of his house, but on the public street. He threatened to get his dog on me, and then he called the police on me. And when the police showed up, I was absolutely armed. And when the police showed up, they asked me if they could see my ID. And I said to the young officer, I said, "Hold on a minute. What am I doing wrong? Brother, I'm trying to work here. This guy's harassing me. I'm on the public street. And I've got this guy threatening me with his dog. Okay? No dice. You don't need my ID. You can see my license plate. If you want to run that, that's perfectly within your rights. You don't need my ID. You have a nice day." And I started to go back to work. And the young officer said, "Well, no, hold on, sir. I asked you for your ID. You have to." And to his great credit, his supervisor, and I wrote a letter to the sheriff at the time saying, "Thank you for taking care of your guys and keeping an eye on them." His supervisor stopped him and said, No, he's right. He doesn't have to give us his ID. He's not doing anything wrong. And then he turned to the homeowner that called in the complaint and said, Sir, you need to go back inside and mind your business, or at least leave this guy alone. You don't need to engage with this guy. He's not doing anything wrong. Let him do what he's doing. Let him go about his business." And part of that conversation was the supervisor said, "Look at the camera equipment he has. This is not some random dude with a point and shoot camera. This is a guy with professional camera equipment, clearly doing professional work. This is legit. We're going to leave him alone. Look, professional camera equipment, for sale sign in front of the house. He said he's here to do real estate photography. I believe him. Y'all have a nice day." That's what a police interaction should look like. Right? That's why I wrote the guy a letter of commendation that I sent to the sheriff at the time. And then there was a whole, after that, the shithead young cop had very bad handwriting, which led to a whole completely separate incident involving insurance confusion that just about ruined me. But at the time, his supervisor did a great job. Maybe I'll tell that story again some other time, but we'll come back to that another time. The broader point, Pretty and Good got themselves killed by doing something that they do habitually. Now, I've explained on this show before, we've talked about it on the show before, about the difference between paid protesters, paid agitators, and actual the people on the ground, the people that you see, the activists. It is my suspicion that Good and Pretty, neither of them were paid activists. It's possible they were that far up in the chain, given Pretty's long history of involvement and given the information that appears to put Good organizing activists around her as well and traveling from out of state. But I haven't seen any explicit direct evidence that either of them are in the paid chain. That said, at least one of the activists that was arrested last week after the terror attack on the Minnesota church, that's Nakima Armstrong, is a paid activist. She is an employee, essentially, of the NGOs and organized groups that are actively organizing this information, these activities. I've got a post I want to read to you guys, and it's a little on the long side, but we're going to take a look at if I can find it. Okay, here we go. Eric Schwalm. This I want you to pay attention to, especially in the context of, God, I haven't even mentioned it yet. Okay. The new information that we have is we've seen the signal chats now. Cam Higbee has infiltrated and exposed the signal chats that are going on between these organizations. We've also got some explicit statements from some individual official operators. Jacob Frey famously said that he was going to have the Minnesota police out fighting ICE to protect citizens, which that by itself should be reason enough to federalize the Guard and send them in to suppress the insurrection. If you've got a person in a position of legitimate authority saying, I am going to intentionally contravene the law and employ my armed agents to oppose the duly appointed legal representatives of the voters of the American people, that should be enough. Insurrection Act now, you go in, you arrest that official, Jacob Frey, and every police officer employed there. And you have to arrest every police officer employed there, right? You don't need to go through and do purity tests and examine their politics, et cetera, et cetera. You arrest every police officer employed there. Ask me how I know. I dealt with more than one corrupt Afghan national police force in Afghanistan. Police forces where the Taliban or Al-Qaeda, I dealt with both, had come in and taken control of the local police force. And they were literally an active cell of external actors, of an active cell of the insurgency. And it's important to understand that what happens when that goes down is you may not have literally every member in that police force having been installed by the insurgency. What you have is enough members and, most importantly, leadership in that organization have been replaced by agents of the insurgency. And the rest are asking themselves the question, am I more concerned about my morals, my principles, and doing the right thing? Or am I more concerned about not being murdered by the other guys and continuing to get a paycheck that I can take home to feed my wife and kids? Their motivation ceases to matter when their actions are to operate in support of the insurgency. So yes, it is time to arrest the entire political and law enforcement body of the state of Minnesota. And on a case-by-case basis, that's not necessarily because they've done anything wrong. It's because they've made the mistake of not removing themselves from the situation. Right? Think about it like this. You and your 4 closest buddies get in a sedan. You drive across state lines because you think you're clever and go to rob a liquor store. One of you stays in the car. Okay, easy. Wheelman. That guy's absolutely part of the crime. The other 3 go inside. One of them just stands at the door to pull lookout, while the other 2 go inside, demand cash, and start grabbing bottles off the shelf. And the guy that takes the register shoots the attendant. All 4 of you will be charged with murder. He will be charged with first-degree murder. The other 3 will be charged with felony murder because they were involved. In fact, if you take it a step further, and what happens is the best possible outcome from where that story got, is the guy in the liquor store, the owner, the clerk, whoever's behind the counter, pulls the shotgun, blows away the guy that attacks him at the register, and the other 3 run screaming into the night. Those 3 will also be charged with felony murder because it is the activity of engaging in the crime that got their buddy killed. That is every law enforcement officer in Minnesota today. That is every public official in Minnesota today. That's what the signal chats tell us. That's what the revelations that these activists are hunting ICE agents. When I say hunting ICE agents, this is where it gets really, really damning. These activists are using license plate scanners to check the license plates of every car, especially dark-colored SUVs, the cars that look like government vehicles. They're checking license plates against a database of ICE agents and government vehicles. That is not public information. That means that there is someone in government in Minnesota who is providing access to those databases for the activists. Now, we have seen Tim Walz actively calling for cessation of hostilities, calling for ICE to leave the state. If it were just, I might even be able to look past that if it were merely the case that he asked for the cessation of hostilities because the protests are getting out of line and we need these ICE agents out so tensions can calm. But no, he took it too far. They're a sanctuary state, and they're demanding. They've explicitly said that they're taking the actions they're taking in order to protect specifically the illegal aliens in their state, not just the normal citizens. Hold on just a second. Not just the normal citizens, but explicitly for the protection of the illegal aliens. That is offering aid and comfort to enemies of the United States, and that is the harboring of fugitives and felons. Right? That means that the government of Minnesota and Minneapolis are specifically and explicitly implicated and involved here. And just like the example I gave with the crew robbing the liquor store, that means that even the Trump votinist, right-leaninist, reddest counties in the state of Minnesota are suspect because they're infiltrated. Right? When you're dealing with known infiltration into your unit, the objective is to eliminate it at the lowest possible source. So if you can identify the company, then you're going to quarantine the company while you investigate and try to identify the express agent. And that may lead to identifying the infiltrated platoon and eventually the squad and eventually the individual. But if you can only identify which company or which battalion, right, you begin the quarantine and cordon at the tightest possible angle where you can lock in quarantine and investigate that. Right now, the narrowest net we can cast is not an individual. We know individuals that need to be dealt with, including Tim Walz. But the narrowest net we can cast to try and excise the problem is the state of Minnesota. And let's be clear, everywhere that you're seeing the extra protests pop up, right? After Preddy hit the ground, there were protests in New York, there were protests in California, etc. Each of those states should get the same treatment. And when I say the same treatment, let me be explicit. Here's what I mean. The end of all federal funding to all state programs in that state. That's a non-negotiable. That needs to happen now. the active investigation, federalize the state, take control of the state, and begin the active investigation of every state official. Okay? That active investigation will be a relatively rapid process at first, where you're going through and you're just saying, okay, these guys have the most suspicious shit, and we're gonna search them out. And when you get through that part, the guys who get peeled off early, you say, okay, this guy's not a part of this. This guy's not a part of this. There's no evidence pulling him into the conspiracy. That doesn't mean that they've got a free pass, forever and ever. That means that as far as we know right now, this guy's not a part of this, and so we're not going to waste resources on him. There's a reason for that. I'm getting a little in the weeds here, but there's a reason for that, and it's this: if we have substantial evidence, if we have substantial evidence on one individual and no evidence on another individual, as much as you might create a loss risk, a flight risk, taking the focus off the less obvious co-conspirator, the fact that you have more evidence on the first guy is not a guarantee, but it's a key indice that this one is higher up in the order of organization, right? And the objective is to get to the highest bit, find the tippy top of the organization, and then work backwards again. So as you work your way up to the top, as you work your way up from the bag boy to the Al Capone, you're gonna wrap some guys up in there, right? And then once you hit the tippy top, once you get Capone wrapped up, you're gonna start working backwards from that back down through the ranks, right? And so in theory, what you have is you identify one connection that goes up to the top of the tree, and then you know where the top of the tree is, and you can work your way back down. Think about finding a Christmas tree in the dark, right? You're wandering in the dark. Okay, here's the side of it, and okay, I found the star, and now I know what the shape of the tree is. Now I can feel the edges. Now I can find where the sides are. That's how machine learning works. That's how an intellectual process works when you're conducting an investigation and breaking up a criminal organization, right? So I want to talk about this tweet for a minute. This details a lot of what I've already been explaining this morning. And I'm actually a little frustrated with myself at the moment because, frankly, I pulled up a lot of really interesting evidence stuff. I've got a bunch of videos and clips up here, and I spent all my time talking. I'm not going to have time to show you a lot of these clips, but let's talk about this guy. So we'll start here. This is from Cam Higbee. I have infiltrated organizational signal groups all around Minneapolis with the sole intention of tracking down federal agents and impeding, assaulting, and obstructing them. Buckle up, all will be revealed. Each area of the city has a signal or several signals. Let's start with a screen recording of all members of the Southside group to start. Now, this is it's 30 seconds of him going through, and you'll note there's a lot of pause. There are some explicit names. Jose Rodriguez, that's probably a fake. Rocky, that's obviously a fake. Robin 2X, Rosie Riveter. So you got people. You got Tankle's hot water heater running. Okay, so you got Tankless. I thought it was a Kankles joke. Anyway, so you see a bunch. They're using code names. So they're using Signal as one layer of communications hygiene, and then they're using code names within the Signal to further obscure their identity and fade into anonymity. And I'll give them this. That's good ComSec. That's good basic InfoSec. Now that said, the groups have been penetrated, and once one layer has been penetrating the next layer is just a matter of time. Now, so this guy Eric Schmalm. I don't know him, but he's from about the same time period as me. This guy spent a lot more time in the world than I did, but he's as a former Special Forces warrant officer with multiple rotations running counterinsurgency ops, both hunting insurgents and trying to separate them from sympathetic populations. I've seen organized resistance up close. Me too. From Anbar to Hellman, I've been to those places. The pattern is familiar: spotters, cutouts, dead drops, or modern equivalents, disciplined columns, role specialization, and a willingness to absorb casualties while bleeding the stronger force slowly. Many of you have probably seen the clip of the young lady who tried to pick up a flashbang grenade and got her hand blown up for her trouble. That's not a one-off, guys. That's not a one-off. Okay. I watched a little bit of Tim Pool last night. He had Viva Frey on, and they were talking about how people understand the way the Civil War is going to go going forward. And you'll get a lot of guys that say, oh, man, well, obviously the right's going to win because the conservatives have all the guns. Yeah, that's true. That's true. It's true that we have most of the guns. But you got to understand something. Yes, a smart, competent, and well-armed warrior will, one-on-one, in an otherwise fair fight, win 90% of the time. But what happens when the other side has a million suicidal sociopaths that are willing to charge unarmed and just pick up the first weapon that becomes available to them? See, a major advantage that the left has is they're working with a large number of people who have a cultish adherence to the same centralized dogma, are suicidally dedicated to the achievement of that activity, and have a fundamental misunderstanding of just how dangerous weapons can be. Right? The right has praetors. The left has Zerg Rush. As evidenced by the activities in the various blue cities, the major blue cities, just over the death of this activist cross-dressing sociopath Preddy, just evidenced by the massive turnout of dangerous people. They have the ability to organize mass mobs where I don't care how good a shot you are. I'm a great shot. I really am. I can tell you, 24 magazines are heavy. That's a lot of ammo. That's a lot of ammo on the front of a vest. I've been there. If there are 100,000 people who are willing to charge into my rifle barrel, it is mathematically impossible for me to stop them all. That's what makes them such a threat, is they are willing, and it's something that I wish we could make the protesters themselves understand, but Barack Obama, Tim Walz, right, George Soros, etc., they are more than happy. They are more than happy to send their entire voter base running face first into a chain-fed, crew-served machine gun. They're more than happy to do it. That's why you see this dumb little fat girl picking up a flashbang grenade, because they're trained, right? We'll talk about the training in just a second here. These activists are being trained to return grenades, to pick up grenades and throw them back. A few years ago, in fact, we had the battle of the leaf blowers, right? Federal agents deployed tear gas. In 2020, federal agents deployed tear gas, and protesters showed up with battery-powered leaf blowers and tried to blow the tear gas back at the federal agents. And so the federal agents brought out their own leaf blowers, and you had a bunch of cops and a bunch of shitheads all standing there with leaf blowers, battling it out, just trying to see whose batteries ran out. Everybody's just praying that one side's batteries run out before the cloud dissipates. Kenneth says only a coward wouldn't be watering these rioters like a forest fire. You know what? God, middle of an epoch-setting winter storm. Protesters are out in the cold. Hell, yes, get the riot hoses. Get the riot hoses. White Walkers and Frosty the Snowman don't vote. That would be magical. That would be magical. Now, in other news, just real quick aside, they are using the what are they? LARDs, long range audio something devices. LRADs, long range audio devices. They are breaking out the LRADs to disperse the population in a few places where they're especially pernicious. But let's get through this a little bit more. What's unfolding in Minneapolis right now isn't protest. He is 100% correct. Now, here's where he gets it wrong. He says it's low-level insurgency infrastructure built by people who've clearly studied the playbook. It is now. I don't know if this came out before he before he got a little more info on what's come out of the signal groups. This is not low level. There is no mistake now that there is official state government involvement. Right? We don't know specifically or explicitly exactly who in state government, but based on the resources being provided to the protesters, it is absolutely the case that someone in Minneapolis city government or Minnesota state government is active at a minimum. It may go higher than that because there is likely, it appears, coordination between the activist anti-American groups in most, if not all, of the blue sanctuary states. But at a minimum, at the Minnesota state level, there is active involvement from the government providing resources to the protesters, and that cannot be understated. Let me see something real quick. How we doing? Hey, I see a lot, just real quick, I see a lot more people out there watching than are commenting. Y'all leave us a comment in the chat. Ask a question. Call me an asshole. But get involved, engage, talk to us, guys. We love having you here, and I'd like to say good morning to you if I could see your names. So, signal groups at 1,000 member cap per month. Dedicated roles, mobile chasers, plate checkers, logging vehicle data into shared databases, 24/7 dispatch nodes, vectoring assets, salute-style reporting size, activity, location, unit, time, and equipment, and suspected federal vehicles, daily chat, rotations, and timed deletions to frustrate forensic recovery, vetting processes for new joiners, mutual aid from sympathetic locals, teachers providing care, possible PD tip-offs on license plate lookups, home-based coordination points, rapid escalation from observation to physical obstruction or worse. This isn't spontaneous outrage. This is C2, command and control with redundancy, OPSEC hygiene, and task organization that would make an SF team sergeant nod in recognition, replace ICE agents with occupying coalition forces, and the structure maps almost one-to-one to early-stage urban cells we hunted in the mid-2000s. 100%. 100%. The things that you're seeing done by these activists, as far as the organization, they're using their cell phones instead of shortwave radios. I wouldn't be surprised if there's some walkie-talkie action going on out there. No, maybe a little surprised because it's not as easy to secure comms those in stateside without some government interference. But the OPSEC hygiene, the organization, this is an insurgency. The state of Minnesota is a rogue state that is conducting an insurgency against the United States government, against the United States of America. It is that simple. That's where we're at. So, I guess I'm going to have to go. Sensible Center. Oh man, Sensible Center. I appreciate your comment. I'll give you a little bit of confession. That thing about getting people to comment, I was really looking for people on Rumble because I need one more to make a certain benchmark. But I do appreciate your comment. I appreciate you watching this morning, especially from across the pond, because I know it's mid-afternoon over there. And you say, British guy just looking at live TV, interesting watching what's going on. It's crazy over here right now. But British guy, if you are in the UK right now, we've been paying pretty close attention to what's going on over there. And brother, we're praying for you because y'all's situation has gotten out of hand in an entirely different way. And I'm worried about, I'm worried about you guys, especially since you have already been long disarmed by your corrupted government. Breaks my heart to see what's going on over in the UK. So good luck, brother. Hey, check us out. We are the earliest far-right extremist channel in the world. We start the day at the Brushfire Mind, right? You want your far-right extremist news? I'm it, baby. I'm it. Everything on before me is just Bible culture, which nothing wrong with it. It's not the explicit political, and it's certainly not the competent military intelligence analyst take on global politics. So that said, you guys, there is so much to this right now, and I have high hopes for some serious developments, but for too long they've been mere hopes, and I really, really need to see things escalate. Really need to see things escalate, because if Trump and the administration do not escalate enforcement activity against these sociopaths in Minnesota and Minneapolis, they will be essentially like they did in 2020 by insufficiently enforcing the law around the riots. And like I was talking about on the show yesterday, they already have created the optics that left-wing violence, extreme violence, up to and including murder and arson and kidnapping, is permissible. Whereas the same thing, if you were to do something that was politically equivalent on the right, you will spend years in solitary confinement without even arraignment, let alone the rest of your due process. Or, and that's if you're lucky, because Joe Biden or whoever the next Democrat president will be might, because we've seen them do it before, just send a bunch of FBI agents to fucking murder you. That's what time it is. The government is soft on leftists and hard on conservatives. The current government broadly loves the globo homo sociopath and hates the American spirit. That's what it looks like. And when Trump loses the midterms, if the conservatives lose the midterms, and it's looking that way, like I've said many times before, it will not be because conservatives had their minds changed and voted for the other guy. It will be because they were demoralized by the clear signaling that our government does not have their interests at heart, is not interested or concerned about the other side being monsters and criminals. and is happy to just let communists riot and burn our country to the ground. And unlike every other country in the world, unlike literally every other country on the planet, there's nobody to come. There's no cavalry to come in, right? Every other country on the planet knows that if shit goes crazy and the people start burning down buildings and murdering government officials, that the U.S. just might step in and solve all your problems overnight without you even asking. There is no equivalent. There's nobody else coming to the rescue. That's not an option. Hey, Boris, I see you jumped over here to give the message from the British guy. I appreciate that. I really do. You you may never know how big a deal that was to me, and I appreciate the hell out of you for it, brother. In fact, Boris, I cannot, because of the way it works, I cannot hand you directly a free 1 month subscription, but I can give one out and hope it hits you. So here it comes. Let's everybody cross their fingers for Boris and see if we can get him a free month of Rumble. Like I said, I can't determine where it goes. Boom! Ha ha! My man, you just won the roulette wheel. Boris was gifted a membership by Brushfire Mind. Thanks for showing up, brother. We appreciate you. And yeah, like I said, that's random. The way that works, I buy a membership for you, right? I pay money for a membership, and then the computer gives it away for free. And in order to receive it, you have to be watching while we're live and have made a comment on Rumble. You have to be watching on Rumble, signed in with your free account or paid account, and make a comment in the live chat. And then you can get the freebies. You can get the chum when we feed it to the flock, because we do that every now and then, and that's good stuff. So, and yeah, that was the last unique chat I needed for the month to make my compliance numbers and stay in the creator program, so I keep getting paid for the show. So you just did me a huge favor, Boris, and I'm happy to return it with some crumbs there. I hope you enjoy it. And now that you've got that, maybe hopefully you'll join us on Saturday at 2100 when Mario and I do the deep philosophical conversation. Y'all, that show tends to be 3 to 4 hours long. We'll have a deep philosophical conversation about what Western honor is and how it compares to other honor codes globally. We'll be discussing white Western warrior culture, chivalry. We'll be discussing Bushido, Isat, Islam. We'll be talking. You'll get some new vocabulary words like taqiya, jizya. You'll face culture. You'll learn a lot that night. So I'm going to, normally when I close the show, I hit that little outro button. Today, since we were talking about these sociopaths in Minnesota, I'm going to close this one out on All Your Martyrs Are Monsters, and I hope you guys enjoy the song. Thanks for watching this morning, everybody. We love you, and we will see you tomorrow. Damn it, it's cold out here.
They light the torches, chant the names, build their altars out of flames. Every sinner's crown of thorns, sold in their culture wars. They preach compassion, sell the rage, turn their prisons into stage. Their saints wear mugshots, their prophets steal. They burn the truth and call it real. Born of lies and pride, they cry for mercy while the innocent die. Oh, their martyrs are monsters built from their sins. Keep the cameras rolling, call that justice again. They sanctify the broken glass, bleeding hands, a riot mass, names carved deep in city streets, halos hung on their deceit. They preach forgiveness, never peace, feed the mob, they never cease. They don't want truth, they want control, trade their souls for the victim role. They want blood, they want fame, addicted to the chaos game. Oh, they're martyrs or monsters, virtue wrapped in vice. They sell their stories, never pay the price. Oh, they're martyrs or monsters, born from fire and lies, and they worship everyone till the last truth dies. They built their temples on broken backs, preach forgiveness while lighting the match. They want a savior, look inside. All their martyrs were monsters before the day they died. They died.
All right, everybody. I hope you enjoyed that. Thanks for watching today. Y'all be safe out there. Stay warm. And again, we love you, and we will see you tomorrow.